Welcome back, everybody, to another episode. It's been a while of Combat and Tactics. We're back, although in kind of a somewhat different situation. And I am joined by, you know them, Bob and Smith. What's up, guys?
What's up?
Happy Sunday.
Yeah, happy Sunday. So, if you're not familiar with our Combat and Tactics series, this is a series that we used to do in person with miniatures back at our studio. But of course, nowadays, so many people are using Foundry. We use Foundry for our Quest for the Frozen Flame game. In fact, we're actually using some of our Quest for the Frozen Flame characters for today's examples. And so we just decided to sort of use Foundry, and we can talk about it, about the game this way, make it a little bit easier to see exactly what we're talking about. So today, we're going to talk about flying. We're going to talk about combat and tactics of flying, mostly as it relates to foes of flying. So I think the first thing we have to kind of cover, I guess the first thoughts are, Bob, you've been running a lot of games. Aaron, you just ran a 20th level campaign. Generally speaking, what are your thoughts on flying in Pathfinder 2nd Edition?
It's fine as long as the party can handle it. Playing at low level, it's super annoying. And I remember playing it in multiple things, even back in the Rise of the Rune Lords, not even flying so much as even creatures above grade, above the plane of the surface. I back then I was sort of realizing like I need a little bit more experience about how to handle foes that aren't on my flat plane. So yeah, they're cool. I think flying creatures are dynamic and they can do a lot of fun. I don't know. I think it's cool for like the big baddies. I don't know if it needs to be everything.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely adds an extra level of complication. Smith, what do you think?
I think flying is interesting how it's handled in Pathfinder 2, previous editions of the game. I think it was a little unchecked, but in Pathfinder 2, it is a little bit more in line. That being said, it's still an outlier because it doesn't factor in as well as it could into things like combat balance. And it really requires both a GM and a party to be aware of what is going on. That being said, I think a prepared party, even a low-level party, can take down a level-appropriate flyer. It just requires additional knowledge that is not as obvious that as a normal encounter might be.
Yeah, and I think that's actually probably, I think the most important, what I would say is the most important component there, which is a flying creature, especially at low levels. And when I say low levels, I mean like maybe before 7, before 10.
Like level 3 or 2, whatever we were.
Yeah, like level 3 or 4. We'll talk about that in a
First
second.
flyer, I believe, significant flyer is level 3. So it's the green drake, I believe.
Is it the
forest drake?
River drake, forest drake, something like that.
Oh, was it a river drake?
It's some sort of drake.
It was rough. It was rough.
Yeah, and so like one of the things that I think that you have to be aware of is that at low levels, the monster math, when you're balancing an encounter, may not really be accurate. Like you could look at a party of level 2 characters and say, okay, a level +2, so that's a level 4 monster. That's 80 XP. That's a moderate fight, a single level 4 monster. But if that monster is a griffin, and that griffin can fly, and you have a party that really doesn't have a lot of ranged options, isn't prepared for that encounter could almost maybe be a TPK. And Bob, you and I learned this the hard way.
Yep.
Because I think the even more important than that is a flyer with a breath weapon or a range attack. And Smith,
that's quite devastating.
As Smith alluded to, we were playing in a campaign. We were level 2, and he used some sort of Drake low level flyer, and it just annihilated us, right? So. But overall, I think before we get into it, I think we should kind of cover a couple of things. And again, I'll be putting these down here on the lower left-hand side so you guys can follow along at home. There's a couple of important caveats to fly that Aaron alluded to in terms of it being a little bit more balanced in Pathfinder 2. And the first and most importantly is the fly move itself. Note that fly is its own action, right? You can see it right here on the screen. Fly is different from stride. I know a lot of people complain about this and have some umbrage with this because they say, oh, you can't fly with your haste move or whatever. But the fly action is different than the stride action. So that is something important to note. And that means that there's a lot of things that say, oh, you can stride. That doesn't mean you can fly. So if something allows you to stride, that's not the same as allowing you to fly. But the most important thing about the fly move is that it lets you move through the air. If you are moving upwards, whether it's straight up or at a diagonal, you move at half speed. You essentially treat the air as if it's difficult terrain. But conversely, if you go straight down, you get to move double speed. So that means that you can, drop down at a very, very, very fast pace.
So only straight down or straight down at an angle?
The rules per the action say that if you move upward, whether straight or diagonally, it goes at difficult terrain. But if you move straight down, do you get double movement. So per the real ruling of the game, you only move double speed if you're moving absolutely straight down. And you can use a fly action you don't have to move. You can basically use fly, move 0, and you can hover in place. If you're familiar with some of prior editions of the game, like Pathfinder 1, there's no such thing in this game as like maneuverability classes, which, you had to be a certain level, like a hummingbird could hover, but like an eagle could not, right? But in Pathfinder 2, everything can basically hover. But the most important rule for flying is this last part. Of course, it's Pathfinder 2. It's hidden at the end. It's buried at the end. If you are airborne at the end of your turn and you did not use a fly action this round, you fall. So that is it. Now, listen, this can create some really wonky situations in the game rules. Technically, something like an air elemental, which has a fly speed, it doesn't even have a land speed. It has to spend a fly action each turn or it falls out of the sky.
That's super goofy.
There are a very few examples in the game which are specifically called out where a creature is essentially able to hover. Like, for example, one of these is the Airwalk spell, a spell which we rated fairly highly. I know we got a lot of use out of it in Aaron's Dark of Winter campaign at higher levels, specifically because Airwalk allows you to, you're not flying anymore. You're walking on the air. And so you're not using the fly action. You're basically using the stride action, but in the air. And so you don't have to spend an action each turn in order to avoid falling. But outside of that, most of the time people are going to be using fly. And that means you have to move or you fall. Okay. So that's sort of step one in terms of the rules. Okay. Now, these are important to understand because when we start talking about the combat and tactics of how to deal with flying, part of the way that we deal with flying is by attacking these specific components.
I would say flying's major weakness is due to its action economy.
Yes, exactly. If you can hit the action economy, that is kind of a definite way of attacking it. The second thing is, now this isn't, if you look in the fly rules, you won't see anything about this. But if you look up the prone condition, okay, if you look up the prone condition, it says, and again, of course, where else? The last sentence, if you would be knocked prone while you are flying or climbing, you fall. This means that if you can knock something prone while it is in the air, it falls. No, well, a couple of things. One, it becomes prone, and then 2, it falls. So, that could be a huge advantage to you. Now, the game understands, because this is Pathfinder 2, that there is a problem, which is you're knocking things out of the sky. And of course, if you're familiar with the falling damage in Pathfinder 2, it's half the damage that you took falling. So if it falls 200 feet, it takes 100 damage, no save. And so, of course, the game has a defense against this, and that is Arrest a Fall, okay? Arrest a Fall is a reaction. And the requirement is that you have to have a fly speed, and the trigger is you fall. This is very similar to what's it?
Feather fall?
No,
grab a ledge.
Oh, grab a ledge.
Grab a ledge or whatever. When you're
grab an edge. Yeah.
If you're gonna like fall off a cliff or something. Mm-hmm. This is the same equivalent version for flyers, and it basically says if you fall, you have to make a DC 15 acrobatics check, and that 15, kind of like aid, is flat, like it doesn't scale. Now it does say the GM might make that DC higher, okay, due to air turbulence or other circumstances. But the long story short is if you succeed at that DC 15 check, you fall gently. You still fall just as far, but you don't take any damage from the fall, okay? So...
Well, so that still works with getting it prone, though, at least.
Well, correct. So most of the time, the following scenario is going to happen. A creature's flying. Let's say it's at 100-foot elevation. You somehow knock it prone. The creature, now prone, falls. And the falling rules state that a creature falls 500 feet in the first round that it falls. So for all intents and purposes, it is going to fall and hit the ground in the same round that it falls. But the creature can make a DC 15 acrobatics check. If it succeeds, the creature will now fall the same amount of distance. It'll fall to the ground. It won't take any falling damage, but when it lands on the ground, it will be prone. So, you've accomplished the goal of getting the creature back down the sky, down on the ground. I will say that if you could somehow remove the creature's reaction or make it use its reaction, now you've set yourself up for a nice little combo wombo.
There you go.
Because now the creature can't even make that reflex save, the acrobatics check, and then the creature is going to take 50 damage, 100 damage, 200 damage automatically, and that could be pretty brutal. I should also note, as sort of a combat and tactic for players, if you expect to be falling a lot, DC 15 isn't that high, but if your dex isn't very good and you're not trained in acrobatics, a DC 15 check can still be pretty tough to make, right? It's not unusual. Let's say you're a high-level fighter. What might your dexterity be? 12? 14? You're untrained in acrobatics. You're making that with +1, right? You don't get any bonus.
That's rough.
And so if you plan on flying a lot, it might be worthwhile to invest in acrobatics. And I would also say to GMs, look at your monster. If that monster doesn't have acrobatics in its trained skills in its monster list, and it's a flyer, be aware it might fail that check, and you might end up just having the creature fall out of the sky and splat on the ground.
I actually think acrobatics might be one of the ones that are always trained.
Is it always trained?
I think athletics and acrobatics, if they're not, I can't say
those
they're
are
always
the most
trained.
Common ones.
They are usually trained because between grappling and flying, otherwise you would just couldn't play the game.
But if you custom made your own monster, it's one thing to remember to add it.
That's a good point.
That's a really good point. But again, so now the dream scenario is the creature's 150 feet up. You somehow suck out its reaction. It could be that you took it away with an ability, or it used its reaction doing something else. Then you knock it prone. Boom. It's going to fall. It's going to be on the ground. It's already prone, but now it's on the prone. It's prone because it fell. And now it also took, 75 auto damage. It probably just died. So those are
not Office Space.
Yes.
Just stomp them.
So those are the basic rules of flying. From those, we can sort of start to think about tactics to deal with them. And I think really we have to break this down. And again, Aaron talked about the story earlier, but in my mind, there's sort of two types of flying opponents, right? If we go to Foundry here, we have something like a gargoyle, okay? Now, a gargoyle has a flight speed of 40 feet. But other than that, it's just clawing at you with its feet, right? It fundamentally does not have a ranged attack. In order to make an attack, this creature has to come in. This creature has to come in and get into melee with you, right? It only has 5-foot reach, and it's just going to come in and it's going to make its attack. And in fact, if we bring up the gargoyle's character sheet here, we can see that, aside, it has basically a jaws attack and a claw attack. It does have clawed feet, which is basically an attack of opportunity that it can only use if it is flying above a creature. But other than that, it doesn't have any sort of extra special bit of mobility. And so that means that a creature like this is going to have to close in, make an attack, and then either stand there in range of you and your allies. If this creature flew in 40 feet to attack Joran, it flew for the turn. It's successful. And even though the creature might be at an elevation of 5 feet, if you think about it from terms of 5-foot cubes, right? Joran is here on the ground. The gargoyle is here diagonally, or it could even be above him. But Joran can reach him with his spears, and the gargoyle can reach him with his spear, with his attacks. But the gargoyle flew. It's not going to fall, and now it can make an attack. And now it could make a second attack and still stand there, or it could use its 40-foot movement and then fly all the way over here.
Now, these creatures, though, are a good one to come across if you have to deal with flyers, because what Derek just did here exposes a big vulnerability. And that is normally using a reaction to trade for an attack is a bad trade, but because flyers already have a diminished action economy. This is something where Joran here could set up and ready for a trip. And when that creature moves in, Joran could execute, hit the creature if it's athletics, bring it down to the ground. And now that creature is going to be stuck there because they had to come in. And then Joran's buddies are going to come in and
just
Thronify it.
Exactly. And so I think I Thronify it. Yeah. And so I think here we can add Thron back in.
For people that don't know, that's a character from our Quest of the Frozen Flame.
Thron and Breck are hiding in the bushes waiting for us to get the flyers down.
Right. And I think Smith got it exactly right here. Because in this case, this creature is coming in, it's going to make an attack, and it's going to move away 40 feet. Now, obviously, this creature doesn't have a ton of speed. 40 feet's pretty good, though. It's faster than the party. And in this case, my creature, could come into here and attack Smith for, with its one attack of its claws or its jaws. And then it could fly, 20 feet to here, but then it could fly straight up. And that means that, yes, it has 20 feet of movement left, but obviously it moves at half speed because moving up is difficult terrain. But that means that its elevation changes to 15 feet, right? So the creature came in, swooped in, attacked, and then skirted out and then went up. And now in melee, no one could attack this creature. And, if we look at the typical party here, if we look at our Quest for the Frozen Flame party, which to be fair, I don't think is probably too dissimilar to a lot of parties out there. I'll add Breck in here too, our big bad fighter.
He's a fighter.
Yeah, he's
in every party.
He's in every party, every good one. But but in this case, Breck is dual wielding axes. Thron is a animal instinct barbarian who uses fists. By the way, both Breck and Thron, neither of them have a particularly good dexterity. Joran has spears, which do have the thrown trait, but he doesn't have a great dexterity either. Not to mention that Throne has pretty short ranges. And so it doesn't take a lot before you start getting a -2 penalty because of range and a -4 penalty range. Now, Droga is particularly well equipped to this because remember, we just showed
that's the only thing I could do with that character.
We just showed how this gargoyle spent 3 actions, right? It took its first action to move in, down, attack Joran. That's its second action. And then it took its third action to move over here and then, gain some elevation. So, from a perspective of efficiency, the gargoyle really wasn't being that efficient. But Droga, on the other hand, is able to just shoot, or Bob, as you would say,
pew 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 pew
pew pew pew pew pew. So if you have a party which is really well equipped for ranged, this could actually almost benefit you because you're going to be making 2 or 3 attacks a turn, and you're just going to be you're going to be like a sentry gun. You're just going to be standing there shooting at these things. But what if you don't have that? Or what if you only have one person in the party who has that ability? Now this is where what Smith was talking about comes in. This is where the ready action comes in. Now, the temptation is, I'll ready an attack. That's not the worst option, right? If you want to. I should also point out that for creatures like the gargoyle, no surprise here. If the gargoyle tried to do a diving bomb run on, Thron, it could zip in on the Thron, attack him, and then skirt away and gain some elevation, safely out of the reach of the powerful barbarian. It could also skirt in on Droga, claw at Droga, and then skirt away, safe from his reprisals, although not from his bow. But if he did try to skirt in on Breck and then skirt away, Breck would still get an attack of opportunity.
That's right.
Because fighters are broken and fighters are going to fight. And so in that perspective, the fighter's at least trading 1 for 1, right? Like the
so that flying creature should not be attacking the fighter.
I mean, nothing should ever be attacking the fighter. But I mean, it is something to be considered of that attack of opportunity can be very powerful. But what if you don't have attack of opportunity? Or what if you really want to bring this creature down? And because remember, attack of opportunity in the case of the fighter or a lot of other things only allows you to make a strike. That means boom, boom damage. But you can take 2 actions to ready, and that ready lets you ready any single action activity, which includes an athletics action to trip. And so, or grapple. I think both.
Mobilize is another great option.
Right. Both of these work really well.
Oh, yeah, because you could restrain them.
Yeah. So we're going to get to, sort of the hallmark of this, the trinity of dealing with a flying creature. We've been talking about knocking them prone. So we'll continue sort of on that space. But now if the gargoyle comes in Okay, we'll use Thrawn because he's so absolutely ridiculous. The gargoyle comes in to attack Thrawn and then move away. But Thrawn used 2 actions on his turn to ready. And he said, when that gargoyle comes in, I'm going to trip him. Now, what the hell does that even mean? Nobody knows, okay?
He's a wrestler. I'm sure it means some kind of wrestling move.
Okay.
Drop and just dive bomb on him.
Okay. Yeah. But if we open up Thrawn's character sheet here, okay, we could see that Thrawn has an insane athletics check of this shows you how often I play Foundry. I don't even with a character. I don't even know where the skills are.
I think it's under proficiencies.
Yeah, a +10 athletics check, right? And that's going to be against the gargoyle's reflex DC, which is 10, so DC 20. So Thrawn has a 50% chance of, actually a little bit better than 50%, a 55% chance of tripping the gargoyle. So the gargoyle comes in, okay? And now Thrawn, right before the gargoyle is about to attack, Thrawn's readied action goes off. So what does Thrawn do? He trips the creature. All right, great. So the creature, if he's tripped, he's going to fall. He's going to fall from whatever distance he is, and he's going to land on the ground prone. Now, he has to make a DC 15 acrobatics check, or he'll actually fall and take damage. In this case, not a ton, because, he's not, very high up. And our gargoyle, by the way, Aaron, does have +10 to acrobatics, although that might be appropriate for him. But either way, the gargoyle's big turn is utterly ruined.
He doesn't get to attack at all?
Oh, he would, but he's prone now.
He's attacking from prone.
He's attacking from prone, which is a -2. So instead, the gargoyle
He'll still hit Thrawn.
Yeah, that's true. But consider the following, though, as a player tactic, if you really want to bait them. Because here's the thing. The gargoyle flies in, and you ready when he moved in to trip him. So the gargoyle flies in, you trip him. And the gargoyle says, screw that. Instead of attacking, he stands up. And then with his third action, he flies away. Mm-hmm. Now you haven't accomplished what you wanted to accomplish. Sure, the gargoyle didn't make an attack on Thrawn this turn, but the gargoyle moved in, Thrawn tripped him, he fell prone, and then the gargoyle stood up and then flew away. We can't get to him. What if instead Thrawn waits until after the gargoyle attacks him? Because now the gargoyle has already used 2 actions. So if Thrawn waits for the gargoyle to move in, lower down his elevation so that he's within range, okay, then Thrawn takes the attack. The creature grabs at him. Now the gargoyle has used up 2 of its actions. Now Thrawn trips it. And let's say he succeeds. Great. Now the creature falls prone and lands on the ground. But he only has 1 action left. The best he can do is stand up. And now his turn's over. And he's on the ground, ready for Joran to move in and set up a flank and deal with these creatures. Now, in a perfect world, we would assume that if the gods were kind, that somehow Pathfinder 2 math, I can't confirm or deny this, that a creature at this level with, say, flight has to sacrifice something somewhere, like in its hit points or in a lower armor class, right? You would hope that this creature is somehow not just, it's just level 4 and it flies, as opposed to
And you see this in other creatures, right? Creatures that have resistances will have lower hit points, right? So game masters making your own flying creatures, consider giving this creature a weaker defense or less hit points, because flying is powerful, particularly at low level.
Absolutely. And I think, I think that when you do encounter flying creatures the first time, it's tempting to say, like, so for example, this is a gargoyle. We double click on it. We can see this creature is level 4. This is a party of level, 4 people. This would be a moderate fight. This is the best way to do it. Like, 1 creature that's a moderate fight, and that way your party can sort of become introduced to it. Don't throw a severe,
You're so bitter.
Do you think the GM is going to so what's going to happen is, Thrawn goes, I ready to trip.
Yep.
And the GM's like, all right, well, I ain't going that way.
Well, this is where we get into this situation.
Does everyone have to start readying, thinking about that kind of stuff? I think there is a certain amount of play to that, right? Like, I guess part of it is how much information is made available. The GM is aware of what everyone's doing, right? Because they're the GM. Like, another way to look at it is like if you wrote down your moves in secret, right? Like, what would that do, right?
We can have another episode about GMing.
Yeah.
GM's not metagaming.
Yeah, is that the GM metagaming too hard? And
It sounds like it.
Now, I will say, Bob, you are bringing up accidentally a relevant point in that a smart creature might recognize that only Droga is truly the threat because Droga is going to be pelting this creature, right? And maybe not so much with the gargoyle who's asked to close anyway, but if you introduced a second class of flyers that Derek was going to get to, which is the ranged attack flyers, the flyers that don't have to get close, the flyers that Thrawn cannot trip or immobilize, they might look at a Droga and go, I'm going to take Droga out because the rest of these guys have no shot if I take out Droga.
Especially when you're talking about like an intelligent creature.
Exactly. But you would know that if you're an intelligent party and we go, okay, we got to keep Droga alive. So let's make sure that he's not left on his own or we're out of distance, because if that creature comes in or gets nearby, maybe we can help and support in other ways.
Right. Exactly.
That's a good call.
Yeah. Now, so the first point is figure out a way to knock them prone. Now, in this instance, we're talking about using trip while they are, on the ground. But the second type of monster, it requires a lot more finesse, okay? And yes, this creature would probably pretty much completely annihilate them anyways. But in this case, you have a large red dragon. And this is obviously level 10.
Oh,
but
so sweet.
A large red dragon, if we open up here on his character sheet, we see a couple of things here. One, his speed is a massive fly 120 feet. Okay, so this creature is going to be able not only to be able to like do its thing, and then it's going to be able to get the hell out of dodge. Like it's just going to be so far away that a lot of range attacks are going to have a massive penalty to miss to their attack roll. But the second thing is it has a breath weapon, and the breath weapon's 2 actions, which is perfect because it means that the creature could be really, in fact, this creature, okay, has a breath weapon that is a 40-foot cone. Now remember, a 40-foot cone, a cone is just as wide as it is long. So that means that if this creature is 40 feet above the battlefield, it will essentially create a 40-foot diameter blast on the ground below it. Well, that means this creature could be 280 feet in the air. And then in one action, with its fly 120 feet, dive bomb 240 feet straight down in one action, stop, and breath weapon the entire party. Then, while it waits for the breath weapon to recharge over the next D4 rounds, it could just regain altitude to make sure it's out of range of any close range attacks. We're thinking about longbows, but who are the other main ranged attackers in Pathfinder 2?
Sorcerers.
Spellcaster. Bob just says sorcerer.
Let's go sorcerer.
That's
technically, Bob, you're more correct.
Bob, you are correct. We know what the range on those are. 30, 60, maybe 120, right? And I mean, aside from like fireball and chain lightning, if you can get above 120 feet, you're basically immune to almost every spell in the game.
And you cannot ready and cast most of those spells that you would throw at this creature.
Because they're 2 actions and you can only ready something that's 1 action. So consider this, the dragon, high up, dive bombs, stops 40 feet above the battlefield, boom, drops a massive, 40-foot template is that's a big, right? That's a big,
that's like at least 3 AP maps put together. So
right, that's a big, that's a big blast, right? Like that's hitting everybody. Okay,
jeez.
So boom, it rolls it. GM rolls a D4 for how many rounds before he breathes again. Obviously, if he gets 1, well, you're in trouble. But if he gets 3. So the dragon knows he's got to kill a couple rounds. But right now, he's in range. He's in range of spells. He's in range of thrown weapons. So the next round, he's got 3 rounds to kill. He just goes straight up. Sure, he moves at half speed. But the first action with 120-foot movement is still 60 feet. He's now at 100 feet. The second action is another 60 feet. Now he's at 160 feet, out of range of almost every spell. Hell, he could use the third action just to flex on you. It doesn't even matter. And then he just hangs out up there, waiting for his breath weapon to recharge. And then when he's ready, boom, drops down like an eagle out of the sky and toast you and flies
And to be
back
fair,
up.
this is what a dragon would actually do. So
I was going to say, this is like what we should expect, but probably don't ever see.
I know that by the way, I apologize in advance because obviously this series is designed to help players. I might be giving GMs some really horrible, nasty thoughts about what they could be doing with their spells. But this is how this creature would react. And so this creature's never going to get in range with you, ever. So we need to start thinking about other ways that we can bring the fight to this creature. Okay. So this is where we kind of get into our third step, which is like, how do you deal with a flyer like this? Okay. This applies to all flyers, but it really applies to flyers like our dragon example. By the way, this dragon's level 10, and I didn't bring a token in for him, but if you want to look one up, another great example of a more lower range character that could do this, Manticore is a classic monster, right? It's a flying lizard lion with bat wings that has a spiked tail that can hurl spikes from a pretty good distance. And that creature could just float above the battlefield, raining down spikes onto the party, trying to get some easy kills. It never has to close into melee range with you. It's never going to give you that opportunity to bat it out of the sky or anything like that, or to swing an attack of opportunity against it. The only person in that situation who's fighting it is Droga, and that I don't need to tell you that if that fight is a moderate or a severe fight, that's assuming that the whole party is participating. And so if they're not, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, that's a good point, because once you decide that it's now a one-on-one fight, well, then it's the encounter is not balanced.
Well, and that's where what Smith was saying about, depending on, there's a role-playing element to this, depending on how intelligent the creature is. If it sees, like a dragon, clearly, but, something that's a little bit more devious and intelligent is going to go, the guy with the bow is the one who I'm going to kill first, because then I'm just immune to this party, and I could just, rain down upon them with unholy glee.
And keep in mind, because Drogo went with the longbow option, even though that dragon's now 160 feet up or higher because he's flexing, Drogo's still landing shots on him.
Right. Droga is still the threat.
Yeah. Let's assume Drogo isn't level 2 at this point, if this fight's actually relevant.
Sure.
So,
otherwise
doing damage.
Otherwise, we died with the breath weapon.
Very much.
Like, Drogo's still going to melt this dragon. And so that dragon can't afford to spend 3 rounds ignoring Droga. So it's going to have to make a decision. Run away, like really far away, come in, kill Droga, then burn the party down, circling around.
Right. Well, and that's what can make these kind of fights. Bob, you were talking earlier about like the dynamicism of these fights. And that's what can make an encounter versus a flying creature so interesting, because let's use our dragon example. Aaron's right. If I roll a 4 on my breath weapon, what am I going to do? Just hang out for 4 rounds while you shoot me for 4 turns? That's still not really great for me. So I might be tempted as the dragon to land next to you and Draconic Fury and bite claw you, which would be great for me. So that means that the party might say, well, we need to get near Droga so that if the dragon lands, we can deal with it. But wait, now if we're bunching up.
Oh, we're bunching up.
we know this creature has a cone breath weapon. That could be bad for us, right? And so this might even be where a clever use of recalled knowledge could come in. Hey, I just saw him breathe. How long do I think I have? If the GM hasn't told you or he doesn't roll it in public. If you don't know, like maybe that's a great way. You go, oh no, we do have a couple of rounds. Let's defend our ranger, and then before it's about to breathe, we can break and scatter, or something like that. Or you can even really, if you have no options, everybody's gathered together. Everybody readies that when the dragon breathes, everyone is going to stride 30 feet away from Droga. So
right.
the dragon comes down on Droga, and then everybody goes break and moves out 30, 30, 30, 30. Now one person got hit with the breath weapon. And yeah, it's Droga, but if that's all the dragon did for 3 or 4 rounds while Droga was plugging it each turn with arrows, this could be sudden. Now you're starting to turn the tide. You're starting to gain the advantage. What if you don't want to just rely on your ranger? Like, how do you deal with a creature like this? Okay, well, option number 1 seems kind of stupid, but you fly yourself.
Yeah, and that should be the first option.
Yeah, if you're fighting this dragon, you can cast fly.
Correct.
What's that, level 8?
Fly is a level 4 spell, so that means it is you castable at level 7. And
7, and the item is Potion of Flying is level 8.
That sounds about right. And fly is a spell that has a 5-minute duration. It's one of those weird ones in the game. So potentially it's the kind of spell that if you know or think or plan that you're going to be going to a flying creature, it is reasonable, even if your GM's a hard ass, that you would have it cast before the fight starts. Now, you don't move very fast. It's against a creature like, dragons are just broken, but against a creature like a gargoyle, which only has like a 20 or 30 foot or 30 foot or 40 foot fly speed, fly spell is much more reasonable because you're going to be able to keep pace with it with flying, and be able to just engage it and charge it in a melee. That doesn't mean that the fight is game over, right? There's still elevation changes to consider, and and if by the way, you might have noticed me doing this earlier, but if you're new to flying in Foundry specifically, when you click on a token, you get these. Or if you right click on a token, you get this little window next to them with a little up arrow on it, and that's how you can change what their elevation is. And so when you put that, it'll highlight that this creature is 40 feet above the ground, and that way everybody knows kind of relatively where things are in terms of three-dimensional space. So that is very helpful sort of to track that. But remember, though, that once you start flying, everything that we talked about applies to you. If you get too high up, that creature might come in and knock you prone.
Right.
and you
will forget.
Yeah, but at least all 4 of you are flying at least.
Which
is good.
You might not have the acrobatics skill trained, in which case you're in for a rude amount of, or the creature might bait you and you use your reaction on like a rogue's gamble, like you're rogue, you're expert, you're legendary or whatever, master in acrobatics, and the creature comes in and attacks you, and you go, I'm going to use my rogue, what's it called, nimble dodge, to and you're like, haha, and the dragon's like, cool, trip you, and you're like, oh shit, I don't have a reaction. If I get knocked prone here, I am falling to the earth, and I'm going to take a lot of damage. I'm not going to be able to rest my fall. So that is definitely one thing to do. Flying is probably the quickest and easiest way, but we mentioned before also the spell Airwalk, which lets you use your land speed, and that lets you maybe in some cases move even faster, but that can be nice because then you don't have to spend the actions to move as well, because that is something to consider. Once you start flying, you have to spend an action each turn, and that's going to really start eating up into your actions as well. So that is something to consider as well.
I always just cast Earthbind.
Right. So
well, if you're going to get
go-to.
offensive with spells at this level, make sure that you pick up Reach Meta Magic, because otherwise that spellcaster range of 30 feet will kill you. Now, you get 60 feet.
That's true.
That's a tough choice for the dragon, because the dragon isn't going to be able to hit you with that blast weapon. He really wants to come in with that breath, but now he's got to deal with a caster who's going to be able to nail him.
Right.
And the good news is casters get terrible feats. So by this level, you should be able to pick this up.
Right. So we that's kind of later in the list, Bob. But
oh, sorry. When you start talking spells, I'm like, the only thing I want to do is cast Earthbind.
Well, obviously that is a very specific thing, and in fact, if you go to our spells, all spells ranked, I believe Earthbind got an S or an A as a scroll. Right.
Yes, I love grabbing as a scroll.
Right. It's a great spell to get as a scroll. We'll get to that in a second.
Okay. Sorry.
No, that's okay. But yeah, so obviously you're going to be, maybe flying up to deal with this creature in melee. The second option is, again, ranged attacks. Obviously, your rangers and your things have ranged attacks. At lower levels, it's not as crazy for people to use ranged attacks, because the disparity between, say, your strength and your dexterity isn't completely out of line yet. And so it makes it a little bit more appealing to you. But for the most part, if you're using range attacks, you're probably already using range attacks. So the option of I'll fall back to my bow, I honestly think, and you can chime in here, Smith or Bob, I think that's actually kind of a bad one. I think a lot of people see a flying creature and they start I drop my weapons, I pull out my bow, and I'm like,
that's what I would have done. I was like, I take my throwing axe and throw it at it.
Yeah, below level 5, it's a desperate action. Maybe if there's a caster that has a magic weapon in a party, it might be worth a shot if you don't have any better ideas. After level 5, it's just don't even do it.
Right, because I mean,
you're just wasting time at that point.
Your magical weapon is going to probably not be as powerful, so it's going to be behind in terms of potency runes. It's going to be behind in terms of striking runes. There might be a 3 or 4 point disparity between your dexterity and your strength.
Yeah,
you're looking at potentially being 5 or 6 points of accuracy lower. And a lot of times, Bob, I think you're right. I think a lot of people look at creatures like this and they tend to use them as sort of the one monster, which usually means he's going to be higher level than you. So that means that being 3 or 4 or 5 points behind,
that's a big difference.
It's a big difference. So a lot of times if like Droga is just, if you have, let's say, 2 ranged attackers, and they, maybe you have a ranger and I don't know what else can shoot in Pathfinder 2.
Gunslinger.
Wait, what's the range on a gunslinger?
If they have like a rifle, I think it could be pretty long.
Okay.
But let's say you have those characters, and then you're like barbarian, and you don't really have anything else. Well, maybe
a fighter with a bow would be effective, actually.
Maybe you're just running around. Because you're if you have battle medicine, maybe you're just administering potions. Maybe you're just using battle medicine checks. Like you might just be a support character in this fight. Part of the I'm going to quote Dungeon World here, but like one of the things that Dungeon World says is to use monsters, use encounters to show a class's strength, but also to show a class's weakness. If you only ever throw creatures that want to just, I want to close the melee and smash, then that melee barbarian is never going to see the downside of their class. And I think a lot of people just default to that. Even to the point where I don't want to call it a soft fudge, but it's a soft fudge. Like they'll have a flying creature who is more than capable of being in the air. And what is the first thing it do? Dive bombs the barbarian, lands in melee with it. Preferably it lands in between two characters into a flank. And it's just like, and then it's dead, and you're like,
how convenient.
That's the Skyrim experience, because in Skyrim you have dragons, but not everyone has a ranged attack, just like in Pathfinder. So the dragon AI will randomly go, "I've decided to land and face you in hand to hand." And so if you're like the guy with the two-handed sword, you're just kind of standing there waiting, and then you're like, "All right, cool, whack."
Right. Because a lot of times GMs, and this gets back to what we talked about before, this isn't necessarily a combat or a tactic. It's more of just an idea, and I know a lot of GMs watch this show as well. You might be in a situation where you throw a low-level dragon. Like, it's not this level 10 monstrosity. Maybe it's a level 7 dragon or something. Like I think a white dragon, adult white dragon might be level 6, actually. It has a cone.
It's the lowest one. I just don't remember what it is.
It has a cone. And you might be sitting there going, wait a second, I'm just going to fly the thing around and kill these people. They're completely unequipped to handle with this. And then you start to feel bad, and you're like, it gets enraged, and it closes down, and it closes into melee.
Don't feel bad, GMs. See, this is a rare opportunity to teach your players a lesson that they don't get to learn very often in modern RPGs. And players, here's the advice. If you're in this situation and you don't have a good strategy, you don't have good terrain, you don't have good ideas, you can't bring it down, you can't shoot it, you don't have potions to fly, run away. Run away, find cover, take cover. That's an action you can do. You can hide. If the creature can't find you, you have to spend time seeking and finding you. So even a terrain like this, where there's no caves or shelter to hide in from this dragon, there's bushes to break line of sight that you can use to hide in, right? Just go, run, and live another day.
Yeah, and I'll give you a great example. This was many years ago. This was not Pathfinder 2, but I was playing in a campaign with Aaron. I was playing a wizard who ended up becoming an evoker, but started off as an illusionist and I think it was like a zombie wyvern or something.
Yes.
We saw it on
good. Hero point.
it was a zombie wyvern. Was swooping low in on the horizon, and I said, "Oh man, this thing's like." We were like level 2 or 1 or 3. This thing's like a level 7 monster that we gotta, but it's like far away, right? Like 600, 700 feet. It's coming in. I go, I'm going to make an illusion. We're in an area with a lot of boulders and like rocky terrain. I'm going to make an illusion of a boulder, and we'll all just like hide inside of the fake boulder. It's a dumb wyvern. Maybe it'll just pass us by. Like GMs don't like as
that's
Aaron,
pretty sweet, actually.
Well, yeah. And but a lot of GMs, if like Aaron was saying, if that dragon, swoops up ahead and he's describing how he's gaining all this elevation, if your party goes, hey, we're going to cover to the rocks, we're going to get low, we're going to hide from the creature, I don't know, don't try to screw them over. Like they're trying to participate in the game in a reasonable way. I'm not in Pathfinder 2, technically speaking, there is no penalty to perception checks for distance. In Pathfinder 1, there was. You had a -1 penalty to your perception check for each 10 foot of distance between you and the target. So if you were 300 feet away, even a fighter hiding, right, essentially had a +30 to his check. We don't have that in Pathfinder 2. But be reasonable about it, right? Like, don't be afraid to say, hey, these players are making a concerted effort to run away. Don't punish them, but when you do that, you're just showing them, hey, everybody, fight to the death every single time because it doesn't matter anyways.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you are worried about making it exciting, bust out the chase rules from the GMG.
Sure, you could use an alternative system. Now it's them running through the canyon while the dragon is swooping in, occasionally strafing them with fire and stuff like that. You could turn it into a whole cool thing, even if it isn't actually the fight versus the dragon. Okay, so you can fly yourself, go fight them. You can use range attacks. We've talked about how before you can ready your actions to try to at the simplest level, you can just ready to beat them. You know, if it's the kind of creature like a griffin or a hippogriff or a gargoyle, right, that is fairly unintelligent, mostly bestial-like, could be a giant bat. If it has to fly in next to you to attack you, you can just ready to beat it yourself. You could ready to strike it. You could ready to trip it. I should also point out, not like we needed more for this, but, a lot of flying creatures tend to be large. Large creatures have reach. So this means now we're kind of in a weird situation where a melee creature can dive bomb you, attack you in melee, but be outside of your reach by just 5 feet. And yes, this is where the gnomish flick mace, but also, pole arms, or having a large spell cast on you can be a big difference. And there's a level range in the game. I would say it starts about level 4 to 5, and maybe goes up to like 7 to 9, where like the creatures start getting large, but the players are still maybe dealing with the difficulty of not being able to be large themselves or not having.
Yeah, you don't get enlarged. Spell 3, so 5th level.
It's 2nd level, but
it's 2nd level. Okay, so 3.
So you could have it at 3, and if a player has a scroll of it, that could be very useful. But and I know it's not always easy to just have an extra pole arm stuck to you, which is also why the gnomish flick mace is so damn good, because the gnomish flick mace or pole arm is going to essentially allow you to function as a large creature. And if that creature comes into, like for example, we have one here in our foundry. The griffin is basically like the griffin is basically like the gargoyle, but on crack, because the griffin is large, giving it 10-foot reach, which means it can come down into melee with Breck or with Thrawn and attack it from 10 feet up, and they can't attack back. The griffin also has a speed of 60. And the griffin also has a special move, the flying strafe, which is for 2 actions. It can fly at speed and make 2 talon strikes against 2 different opponents as it sort of strikes by them, right? So, that
I can just envision that, like the griffin's just hovering and attacking, and everyone's like, "Oh no, I can't get you."
Right,
like,
so like
kind of funny and super annoying at the same time.
Right, so like the griffin could have started all the way up here. It takes its first action to fly here, and then it takes its next 2 actions to do a flying strafe, allowing it to make a 60-foot fly move, and then as it passes over Droga and Joran, claw, all while maintaining a 10-foot elevation, meaning that anyone who doesn't have reach or isn't large isn't going to be able to attack it no matter what they've readied. So again,
and the fighter can't attack or opportunity it.
Yeah, the fighter can't attack.
That's huge.
unless he has a gnomish flick mace.
Okay, well, a smart fighter would be raised by gnomes.
Or a pole arm. I should note that. Olapar. Again, don't get me wrong. Pole arms are great. The downside of the pole arm is supposed to be that you are giving up your extra hand in order to wield the pole arm. But the gnomish flick mace doesn't have that disorder. But anyways, I digress. My point is, readying in melee, as you get higher in level, becomes less and less of a viable option. The creatures are going to be faster. They're going to have higher speeds. They are going to have more reach. They might have ranged attacks. You're going to need to be more creative.
But you'll also have more options as you gain higher levels.
Precisely.
Especially if you're a spellcaster.
Correct. And that brings us to sort of, we talked before about the flaws. The flaws or the downside of the fly action. And as a reminder, and Smith said this at the beginning of the video, the fly action, if you're knocked prone, you fall. And we've talked about ways that you can deal with that. But keep in mind, there are other ways to knock creatures prone other than with a trip attempt. There are some spells, for example, which can knock a creature prone. If you knock a creature prone, even if it's from a spell effect or from a critical specialization effect, maybe you do have a fly spell cast in you, Bob, and maybe we go back in time to Azius, and Azius flies up to engage the creature, lands a crit with his maul. Well, in addition to doing probably a lot of damage, the creature is now prone. In fact, that's even better, right? Because there's no check at all. And then the creature is going to The creature is going to plummet to the ground. And then either arrest its fall and take no damage, but still be prone on the ground, or it's going to splat on the ground. Either way, it's a good win for you.
And not just things like trip, though. Keep in mind, again, going back to action economy is devastating with these things. So slow, which is already the most broken spell in the game, is even more broken with flying creatures. You cast a slow on a creature, it loses an action, it has to spend an action flying, it gets 1 action left. You just shut down that dragon.
Right, because now the creature can't fly in, do its attack, fly away. Now, if it's slowed, the creature can only, or stunned, the creature can only fly in, make an attack, and then it's still there.
Right.
And on the other side of the coin, right, we talked about fly has 2 potential downsides. The first is that if you're knocked prone, you fall to the ground. But the second is if you don't take a fly action,
right,
you fall. That means if you can immobilize a creature, if you can eat up all of a creature's actions, if you can, if you grapple a creature, it'll fall prone, right? Because if it can't escape, it can't fly. Mm-hmm. If you, by the way, you could be prone and still in the air, and the fly action has the move trait. You cannot use actions with the move trait while you are prone.
You have to stand up before you can resume flying.
You have to stand up in the air before you can move away. And so if you can somehow make it so that creature cannot take the fly action, either because you don't allow it to make a move action, right? Another example, maybe a monk flies up and then the creature tries to fly, but he does his standstill and disrupts it. That move action never occurred, and now he'll fall to the ground.
Yep.
That's kind of funny.
So there's all these really cool, interesting ways. And when you're looking, and we've been talking about spells, but there are a lot of spells that immobilize. There are a lot of spells that knock prone. And I think you can use these spells and you can use these abilities to really gain that kind of advantage. So I think that is a huge win. So I kind of have 2 more things that we want to talk about. Finally, getting back to what you were talking about, Bob. But there is one thing that I would be remiss if I did not mention it, and it's more of a high level option. But obviously, a lot of people in Pathfinder 2 make melee characters. It's very attractive. Strength adds to both attack and damage. And a lot of the fun characters in the game use this. There is a rune that you could put onto your weapon. Now, you probably don't want to put this onto your main weapon, but because of the price differential in Pathfinder 2, once something is, a couple levels below you, it's almost trivially cheap. So if you have something like a +3, major striking warhammer or like maul, maybe you just have a +2 striking weapon and you put an extending rune on this. This came out in Secrets of Magic.
Yep.
Extending rune lets you, for 2 actions, make a strike with a melee strike at a range of 60 feet. Now, it's not perfect. It's not going to solve every issue, but it gives you a lot. It basically allows you to melee attack with that option. Now, obviously, extending runes are level 9. This is not going to be an option until you're in your teens, and you're going to have a lot of other options at that level as well. But if you really want to just beat people, and keep in mind that, for example, if you put an extending rune on a maul, well, now from 60 feet away, I hit him. If I crit him, it's prone, and now it falls to the ground. And now it's just better for everybody. So that extending rune can really give you a nice option. And then at level 13, you can get a greater extending rune, and that reaches it out to 120 feet. And that rune is usable infinite times per day. It just makes it a 2-action strike instead of a 1-action strike. So you can't attack a bunch of times.
Does that work? This is gonna be a side tangent, but does that work like if you put on the magical hand wraps? Do you like become the guy from Street Fighter where your arms extend out? And
it has to be placed on a melee weapon. So as long as hand wraps of Mighty Blows count as a melee weapon, which I think they do.
I know you could put runes on them. That's why I just didn't know.
It
could be a topic for a different day.
I don't actually know. I mean, it says specifically a melee weapon. I don't know if hand wraps count as a melee weapon, but you're thinking of Dhalsim from Street Fighter 2.
Yeah, I was just thinking. Anyway, continue. I don't want to take it too off. If you know the answer in the comments section, you guys can put it in.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a combat tactics without Bob going onto some
sorry
fanboy tangent. But the creators of Pathfinder 2 understand that flying is potentially a challenge. It's something that you have to deal with in the game, and so there are a couple of specific spells and feats which deal exactly with flying. And Bob, you were mentioning
Earthbind.
It's a level 3 spell, so your casters are going to get it at level 5, probably around the time where you're really going to start fighting more flying creatures. It has a range of 120 feet. It's a fort save, and even if they pass the fort save, they still fall 120 feet. So, now granted, they can just fly up again, but if the creature's 100 feet in the air, and then you delay your party so they all go after you, and you Earthbind it, and it passes its fort save, it is now still on the ground. It falls safely, but it's on the ground. And your party can then use that opportunity to just, destroy it. If the creature fails to save, it still falls 120 feet safely, but then it can't fly, levitate, or do anything otherwise. It can't leave the ground at all for an entire round, which is probably all the time that you need. And then if it critically fails, it can't leave the ground for an entire minute. So that is an example of a very, very direct, exact, and specific, assault on flying. But there's also feats. Monks get a flying kick that lets them, it's for 2 actions. They basically have to make like a high jump, and they can make a strike while in the air. I think barbarians and fighters get something similar called sudden leap.
Rogues get another feat that does something similar to take out a flyer.
Right. So rogues and fighters each get a felling feat.
Yes. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, so rogues get a thing called felling shot. You make a strike. If it deals damage, they have to make a reflex save. If they fail the reflex save, they kind of almost get earthbound. Mm-hmm. Fighters get something similar, but it's only for melee attacks. So the rogue one there is probably a lot better. But even still, if you have that one fighter who can get up into the air, maybe through flying or whatever, felling strike is level 8 feet. They're going to hit them. They're going to fall. Now, is this?
Well, that's just part of your strategy, right? Like if you know that you can take that feat, and then someone else in your group can cast fly on you.
Yeah.
This is like sort of what you guys plan out beforehand. If we come in this situation, I'm going to cast fly. You're going to go up and knock them down. Knock them
that's
down.
right.
Well, and I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant here, but I mean, part of the thing is someone might look at this feat, this felling strike feat, or the felling shot feat that Smith was talking about, and say, "But that doesn't fit my build. I'm not going to put that into my class." And that's fine. That's true. You're like, I only want to take the feats that are me dual attacking. I don't want to take any of these feats that might not come up a lot or might not use it, come up a lot. And that's fine. And if your GM or the adventure path that you're on never challenges any of your assumptions, then yeah, you're just going to stomp everything and never be challenged at all in the game. These feats are designed so that when you are sacrificing probably some high-end power. As a fighter, you get so many feats anyways. I don't know that it matters, but what you're gaining is a lot of versatility. And I think what Bob was talking about too, it's in the context of a party, of a plan. Hey, do we have a plan for dealing with invisible creatures? Do we have a plan for dealing with flying creatures or highly maneuverable creatures? And then you say, okay, yeah, what is the plan? I'll take this feat, you take that spell, you'll have that ability. And if we encounter a flying creature, this is our plan. This is our tactic. And I think
it is a team game.
It is a team game. And I think flying creatures really drive that home. If every encounter that you basically fight for the entire game is melee creatures in a 30-foot by 30-foot room, okay, you could just...
Whoa, those rooms are huge. What APs are you playing?
You could just roll your face across your character sheet, and you'll probably beat every encounter.
I don't think that works quite the same, but I appreciate the hustle.
I can't face roll my dice.
Everyone plays on Foundry anyway. You can face roll your keyboard.
Yeah, you can face roll your keyboard. Oh, yeah. So again, a great option to find these, by the way, go into Archives of Nethys, select feats, and type in words like flying or to the ground, and it'll bring up feats and options that talk about these things. We mentioned, I'll put a kind of a quick list here, but there's things like flying kick, felling strike, felling shot, steal the sky.
Or anything like drop prone. If you get them to drop prone, things like those are good keywords to search for.
Exactly. Anything like the knockdown feat might be a good option if you could think about that. We mentioned sudden leap. That at least lets flamboyant leap is one for the Swashbuckler. Fantastic leap is one for the rogue. All of these essentially allow you to kind of like get up there and make that attack. And that attack might be, at least you're doing damage. At least you're, maybe helping out Droga, who's otherwise on his own. And we kind of talked about this a little bit. Aaron was talking about running away. I think the third option, or the last option, I should say, is we've been talking about how do we deal with the flyer on its terms, right? Which is it's in the air. But this is a role-playing game. It's not a board game, contrary to many people's popular beliefs. And that means that there's a lot of options for you out there. Aaron was talking about you could run away. But maybe you retreat to underneath thick cover, like trees, and suddenly the flying creature's advantage is taken up. Maybe you know that there's a flyer in the area, so you rig a trap, a net, or some ropes or something to try to bring the creature down. Think of all the ways in movies where people try to deal with flying creatures and say, hey, how can I apply this to my role-playing game? Withdraw to a cave, try to bring it to the ground so that it has to attack you there. There's a lot of spells that create things like concealment clouds and high winds, and you might say, why would I ever use this? Well, if the creature can't see you because you created a dense fog cloud, but it still wants to kill you, it's going to have to come down there and deal with you directly in melee. So all of these options, ways to sort of,
there's an interesting spell called Ash Cloud that does something like that, where they can't detect the smell, and then also the creature is the flying creature is in difficult terrain, which is really interesting.
Yeah,
there's cool stuff like that.
There's some spells in the game that specifically deal with flying creatures.
Yeah.
I
would scroll them if I need to.
If you need to, I think one that probably comes up a little bit maybe is like Wind Wall.
A great first level spell to deal with flyers is Gust of Wind.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Gust of Wind's good. Command's not bad if you can get them to drop prone.
Nice one, Bob. That's actually really good. Yeah. Wow, that's actually a really, really good one.
Yeah, I was looking at things that you could do before you learned the fly spell, because that's really, after that you should just be flying.
Right. But yeah,
well, at least you know how to deal with it, even if you're not ready to fly.
Yeah, command is great. Gust of Wind is really great. Gust of Wind is great because it specifically has that additional bonus effect against flyers, right? Which downgrades them to a critical failure,
right?
Which knocks them prone.
But it's also 60 feet, which is really nice.
It's also
Command's only 30.
Command's only 30. Right. Yep. And you do have to plan a little bit because, you can't ready spells because spells are 2 actions. So
Yep.
And I'm sure there are other instances, focus spells, feats, magical items, which also kind of get around this, But I think
if you know them, put them in the comments below, because other people watching this video will then look to those comments for other options that they can deal with as their party.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you do this, one of the things that I think more people should do is create exciting dynamic combats that, use a variety of challenge. If you've watched our Night School episodes, you know that I think creating fights that require, you to think up here and not just on your character sheet, I think are good things for the game. And so I would think that using a good mix of flying creatures, introduce them early as a relatively simple encounter so that the group can sort of, get their feet wet. But
early, not too early.
Off level 1.
Yeah. Well, not as a severe encounter, and not as a dragon that has a rechargeable breath weapon. While also including a Final Fantasy style raid mechanic of acid globes falling from the sky that
was pretty cool though.
That then explode.
GMG said it was balanced.
So that was us talking about flying. Combat and Tactics is back. So I want to thank Bob. I want to thank Aaron for joining me today. And again, we're going to be using Foundry. We're going to be digging into the nitty gritty. And that means that we're going to be bringing this series back. We know that many of you have been asking for it. So, look forward to more episodes of Combat and Tactics from the Knights of Last Call. So
post topics below if you have certain ones that you specifically want to know about.
And very important, if you like this video, subscribe, consider becoming an adventurer. That lets us know that you like these videos and that we shouldn't just go do other things that you're also not going to like.
Correct. And also, by the way, if you like 1 hour long discussions about one element,
20 minutes.
Right. I thought this was a 15-minute video.
It was supposed to be a 15-minute video, but it just can't be done. I mean, Pathfinder 2 is a very deep game, and you either like that or you don't. If you don't want very deep, rich mechanical, thinking and processing in your game, which is fine. If you don't want this kind of very complex tactical game, videos like this, maybe Pathfinder 2, aren't for you. But if you do enjoy them and you do like considering and talking about them, consider joining our Patreon, patreon.com/nightsoflastcall, where you will be joining an entire community of people who also like these kind of games, but also like other games too. We talk about Pathfinder 2 scratches that tactical minis itch. I played Warhammer for many, many years. Pathfinder 2 is very good replicate, so substitute for that. But I also like Powered by the Apocalypse, Legend of the Five Rings, and Blades in the Dark. So, the Knights of the Last Call Discord and Patreon allow me to sort of kind of scratch all those itches. So if you're interested in role-playing games as a hobby, as a lifestyle, I encourage you to check it out. Bob, any final thoughts?
No, I love these videos because it makes me think a lot as well for things that I should be doing and looking for, and things now from the GM side that I need to be looking at and looking for, maybe even help my newer players that are just learning Pathfinder, things that I could tell them. As you teach me, I then teach them. So I think that's really cool.
I mean, that's a great example. I was doing research for this, and I somehow missed both Command and Gust of Wind. So,
which is really funny because you just finished your 80-hour-long spell review.
To be fair, that was level 1, so that was
That's true. It's been a minute.
And the great thing about Gust of Wind, by the way, is because spell DC scale in Pathfinder 2, irrelevant of the DC, you could get a level 1 scroll of Gust of Wind, and it's going to be just as useful at level 13 as it would be at level 3, which is really, really great. Smith, any final thoughts?
We play a lot of D20, and you can't play D20 games without combat. So whether you're a combat as sport or combat as war, these conversations can be interesting, and I think healthy for the game. So let's have a couple more of them.
And I think that's a great point to end on too, which is, when we talk about combat and tactics, that doesn't just necessarily mean, oh, here's this, mechanical feat that you could take, and interact with that way. It also comes down to strategies and tactics and having a plan and, approaching these fights like a battlefield commander would, or like a soldier would, where you're trying to gain advantages in the game and setting up the situation to be advantageous to you. If an encounter with a flying creature isn't to your advantage, don't just stand there and die, either get out or change the circumstances, learn from your mistakes, adapt, get new items, new potions, new feats. And then the next time, you'll be ready.
Have a plan is sort of what you're getting at there. Is like you as a party, if you guys aren't thinking about flying creatures, invisible creatures, stuff like that, it's might be time to at least bring that conversation up and make sure you guys have a plan.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's an important point too. I'll scope for this video, but have a plan for when you don't have a plan.
That's right.
There you go.
Right, because no plan survives contact with a nat 1 on your D20 roll.
Correct.
Which is what makes the game interesting and keeps it fun and fresh and exciting. All right. Well, if you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, check us out, patreon.com/Knights of Last Call, and we'll see you next time on Knights of Last Call.